Hey everybody, this is John Hogoboom with the AT&T ThreatTraq team. I wanted to give you an update about some of the recent activity around the Colonial Pipeline event that occurred a few weeks back. We do have confirmation at this point that they have paid the ransom. It was kind of up in the air whether they had and how much it was, but the reports we're seeing now is that Colonial Pipeline did pay the hackers $4.4 million in ransom in order to retrieve a decryption tool. One of the things about this is that, they didn't, the decryption tool did not actually completely recover everything for them as they had hoped. So even though they paid the ransom, it wasn't 100% recovery right from the get-go. So a couple of other tidbits about this is that, the attack was discovered early in the morning on May 7th. They shut down the pipeline about an hour later. And, when you're in a critical infrastructure business like this that doesn't really have the luxury of time to assess the extent of the damage that's occurred, you really do need to get your business recovered and get back to, normal business operations as quickly as possible, because it can impact a large community of people, especially when you're supplying gasoline and oil to, half of the United States. That can be a pretty significant disruption of service, or even like some of the other stories we talked about with hospitals and whatnot. So, Colonial Pipeline had made a decision here that it's probably better to pay to make sure that they have all of the options available to them to recover as best as possible. So some of the other things that I want to point out about the stories recently with ransomware is we do have some additional numbers that we've researched and discovered. So recently, the attacks have increased by about 485%, ransomware attacks in 2020. So this really is on the rise. We're seeing these the extortions to be much larger in requested monetary. So, 4.4 million for Colonial Pipeline. But, in the old days of ransomware, they might be trying to get much less money from smaller business operations or smaller businesses. Whereas now the attackers and the ransomware actors are being very careful, deliberately planning their targets, getting into ones that they know are going to have a high pain or a low pain threshold, and that they're going to be able to pay a lot, but are not going to be able to absorb significant downtime in their business. And, because of that, we've seen some numbers reported that about 70% or so of the victims are actually paying because when this type of activity occurs. And mostly that's probably because they, a combination of things. They either don't have really good, plans put in place ahead of time to recover from a scenario like this, where they haven't, practiced tabletop exercises to make sure that they'll be able to recover in a scenario. And additionally, like I said earlier, it's very possible that, they just wanted to make sure that even though they might have had some disaster recovery plan ready to go and in place, you don't know the extent of the damage early on. And when you're in a critical infrastructure that, every hour is millions of dollars lost, you probably don't have a lot of luxury of time to just, assess the problem to its fullest to understand the extent of the damage that has occurred to you. So you want to have all the tools that you can to recover as quickly as possible. So my recommendation is that in order to avoid, ending up in a situation where you have to pay a ransom to these attackers in a ransomware type of incident, is to have a really good battle plan put in place. You've, outlined what your critical assets are and, basically your crown jewels, so that if something like this does happen to you, what's, in scope that needs to be recovered as quickly as possible. And then do some tabletop exercises to make sure that you are prepared for that type of situation and really act it out, as opposed to just having it written on paper. You want to make sure that you, practice recovery so that when it does happen to you in real life, hopefully it doesn't ever happen to you. But if it does, you're prepared to do that.